The countdown's on, MP.
Damo, the biggest and best wellness summit ever is fast approaching.
Don't miss out on the entertainment,
The education.
the edutainment that is the Wellness Summit.
Featuring for the very first time at the summit, the Merrymaker sisters, Carla and Emma Pappas, and the 2013 Bachelor himself, the incredible chiropractor and sharp mover, Mr. Tim Robards, plus all of your Wellness Couch favourites. And wait for it, Damo.
All 22 podcasts on the couch will be in attendance at the summit.
Wow, so take your digital Wellness Couch experience and make it a real-life one at the transformational, inspirational, sensational 16 hours of Powerhouse Wellness Summit at the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre.
September 10 and 11. More information and tickets available at www.thewellnesssummit.com.
Now, before you go, Damo, there's a big competition on as of now. Every single person who registers before 11:59pm on Sunday, August 14, goes into the draw to win a double pass to the inaugural 2016 Wellness Couch Awards Night.
Amazing. You'll join the who's who of the Wellness Couch as we present for the very first time the best new podcast, most popular episode, most popular host, the best hair, of course, MP, most awkward moment, and many more sensational awards at this night of fun and wellness frivolity.
But you must enrol, folks, by August 14. Tickets at thewellnesssummit.com.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Julie Tenner.
And I'm Bridget Wood. And today we're talking the lofty topic of legacy.
The lofty topic.
Yeah, I think it really does feel quite lofty when we're caught up in the day-to-day of who we are and what we want to be and I suppose things that are so far removed from the idea of us as individuals ever having the vision to leave a legacy. And legacy meaning something that lives beyond you do, beyond the time of life that you spend on this earth. And that, I'm not simply talking about perhaps the children that you leave, but the idea or the imprint or the impact or the change that you bring about that can be enjoyed and revered for generations to come. So we really want to unpack that concept of why it's important to even think about, why it will be driving us even if we don't realise it, because there's an inherent nature within all of us, often buried deep below all of the human emotion type stuff that we all carry around shame and guilt and conflict and self-loathing and all of that stuff that we need to shed in order to find more of our own magnificence. That magnificence that we have has within it a desire to leave a vast impact. And the values that we have in our life, that our life is demonstrating, will be directly linked to what that legacy looks like.
And is a legacy kind of what you want people to think about when they think about you?
I don't even know that it's that kind of that can be a way to get to what yours might be, but it's not even that there's even any ego attached to what you want to be known for. It's really the difference you want to make. What is it that stirs your soul and lights up your heart and inspires you, where time disappears, where you embrace the challenge along the way because something is so important to you, that is guiding you towards what it is that your legacy is wrapped up in.
Would you say legacy is genius?
Yeah. And I mean, genius can be interpreted, I think, differently depending on your view of that word. But genius, I guess, in our definition, is really that sense of what is it in you that is almost like part of your DNA. Like it's a talent that you have, it's a gift that you have, it expresses itself and ripples out into every area of your life because it's so inherent in your being. It's not necessarily that you have to be a Mozart or a, incredible physicist or, anything like that form of genius that we might define that as. It's like, what is the essence of you? and that will be part of your legacy.
And wrapped up in that is your service to this world.
Yeah.
Which is where your abundance and soul purpose lie.
That's it. And, really, we are all, our genius is there for us to awaken and for us to serve the world with. And our legacy comes through that service. So it's about unlocking that.
Is legacy therefore soul purpose then? If genius is the expression or the path towards legacy, is legacy and soul purpose the same thing?
In some ways, yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I mean, legacy is something that you actively choose that you want to leave. And so it might be through asking yourself a series of questions, in 100 years' time, what will have existed because I lived?
Whereas soul purpose is almost the opposite of that in a way, though, isn't it? It's all the bits that you don't know yet you're striving to find.
Yeah, and I mean, they're both deeply interconnected because they both help each other unravel, because there's that concept of a soul purpose, which I think is always evolving, and your purpose is always unfolding. I don't know that it's set in I don't think it's a contract. I don't think it's set in stone. I think that your perceptions and life experiences will help you to reveal that to yourself. But legacy might be something that you decide that you want to work on. That, say if you are in your 30s, okay, well, by the time I'm 70, I want to have seen this come to fruition. I want to have achieved that. I would like to make a difference in this field. And actually, it's because most of us, we try and put far too much in our days and stress ourselves out in the short term without creating vision for the long term. So we overestimate what we can get done in a day and underestimate what we can get done in a decade, because very few of us bring vision to what we want to actualize in the decades of our lives. By chunking down, like saying, okay, in 100 years I want to have left this, which means in 5 years, who do I need to be? What do I need to have brought alive to fulfill that? Kind of chunking it back to the next 5 years and the next 3 years, and
which in itself seems pretty lofty. I mean, how did you go about that?
I think it's still evolving, and for me it depends on, and this is a lot of people who try to apply this, you almost need to come back to this daily, because your emotions and your feelings of not being good enough and shame and guilt that comes in that distracts you because of the conflicts in your relationships and other things going on in your life are all things that take you away from staying true to that path often. So that's why having that practice of, I want to be, do and have this, this and this in every area of life, almost have that as being kind of your blueprint, which you work to with a fluidity, knowing that it's going to shift and change, is how you can almost self-govern on that path. I have friends who do that really well, and kind of talk about refining their vision, because life and life experience requires you to refine that vision. It's not going to be, this is what I'm going to go for, and I'm going to be going for that hammer and tog regardless of whatever else happens, because it's impossible to do that, and you'll have relationship issues and you'll have a whole lot of shit go down because you're so dogmatic about the way it needs to be. It's really about bringing fluidity to it. But we can see people who have left legacies in the most obscure of areas, and that's where I think it's really important to not limit yourself where you think that, that's not worthy of creating income from, or that's not.
It's just interesting you should say. I was listening to, I know you're going to laugh at this, but I'm like mega loving on Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
every time I have something, like, well, Tim Ferriss said.
Yeah, actually there is. Which one was it that you listened to?
Well, I was about to say, I listened to this one where he was interviewing this, and I don't even remember his name, to be honest, but this like really amazing mathematician of his time.
Yeah.
And this mathematician was worked out statistically that you don't need to be famous on a grand scale to create enormous change in this world. That in fact, all you need to be is famous to 3,000 people.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
That's so interesting.
So all you need to focus on is being famous to 3,000 people.
For the change that you can enact. Yeah. That's incredible.
To one, create a life of abundance. Yeah. So when you're talking about financially, working or finding your abundance within your genius is 3,000 people who see your genius and who are seeking that same path is all you need to be to then influence your legacy within a worldwide scale, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
And in fact, Tim Ferriss was saying is genius because you're famous enough to influence change, not famous enough that it impacts your lifestyle as a public figure. Very interesting.
Which is almost kind of the sweet spot, isn't it? Because, you know, there's an illusion that says that people like, you know, take whoever it is in the limelight, have a fantastic life, because it would be bloody hard to be living everything in the limelight.
Yeah, definitely.
And to have every, you know, rub and, you know, vulnerability
can you imagine?
Out there for the world to see. You know, that idea of affecting change within a manageable community. And it also speaks to niches, right? I mean, the Key Person of Influence work talks about that. Don't be afraid to micro niche because for everything you value, there's somebody else out there who values that. And I mean, and you know, your work in birth and door service is a perfect example. I mean, it's a small
section of the population
who value it, but boy, do they value it.
Yes.
Right? Like women live and breathe this stuff.
Yeah.
And if you can be the conduit to help people connect more to what they truly value, then what a gift.
Yeah, totally.
So, you know, it's about capping yourself when you feel yourself saying things like, oh, you know I love, like, I don't know, whatever it is, but no, it's just not possible for me to, it's not practical for me to make money off that or this or that. No, I need to get, you know, your standard job. It's about asking yourself, but how can you? And continually entertaining that idea, questioning, you know, beyond those limiting beliefs that say owning a job is the way to bring that income or support my family or support my vision. Because the more time that you can dedicate to expanding your knowledge and then refining that into products that serve people, the greater your wisdom grows in that area and the greater you're able to serve people because you're turning it into tangible things for people to consume and in turn learn about and in turn share, so it's creating those ripples even more. But I think that there's it's a classic problem with our humanity in that our human potential is infinite really, but yet we are so cultured to believe that we're not. You know, like, I mean, even the education system's a great example because the standard education system was created for what they called drones, like, you know, just the basic level of education that was designed in the 1950s in America to pretty much create a whole bunch of little producers who could go to a factory and read stuff and have some basic understanding of how to apply concepts. It was never to create Genius was never to nurture genius. It was simply to provide a basic level of knowledge to help you make your way in the world. And maybe we place too much emphasis on what education's supposed to do versus at home what we're supposed to do. But because we have been limited in our own potential for growth and what we're here to do and the very magnificence of being here on this earth in this moment, in this time, we then don't recognise that in our children, and so the cycle continues. You know, it almost requires often like our own challenging of those ways that we typically live in order to empower our children to challenge it too. So legacy's lofty for all those reasons because we're rarely ever called to ask ourselves what that would be for us.
So the questions that we need to ask ourselves are what?
In 100 years, what will have existed because I lived?
Is that it? Is that as far as you go with your questioning? What if you draw a blank and you go,
Well, often you will because if you unless you're really, really clear on what's deeply important to you and your purpose, then you might draw a blank.
So where do you go from there then?
You do your values.
Yeah, fair call. Find your genius that's hidden within your values.
Yeah, and excuse me, you look back at what your life has demonstrated, like what's the consistent thread? What is it that you can lose time reading about or learning about or talking about? What is it that, piques your interest in a conversation happening on the other side of the room where like all the rest of the sound just drops away and you totally tune into what's going on over there. And how does that link back to the last 10, 15, 20 years of your life, where the form of it might have changed, but the thread is still there. Like that there's still something connecting it all together.
And in fact, that's been interesting to watch in our online from our Loathing to Loving group.
Yeah.
It's actually now just finished, but it was so gorgeous to witness that. And when there was questions and confusion along that journey, that in the webinars you and I had even sat down and gone, but have you looked at the benefits of what this is? And you assume everyone has these traits based on this, but they don't. And it was such an epiphany moment for those
really was.
women, because we so are not accultured to find our own genius, like let alone the genius of those around us. But it's definitely, as soon as you see it, the immense gratitude you have for yourself is like earth-shaking.
And the reason why often we can't see it is because we place judgments on the way we think we should have done things. Like, so, for instance, like in my case, I kind of failed a whole bunch of subjects at uni, and I took ages to finish my degree. And, if I really subscribed to the way things should have been, then, if I really cared about that, then I would have done well, or, done it in the desired time frame and gone on to do a cadetship in journalism and gone on to do all this. As long as you have that self-talk with, in your head about how things should have been, you're not appreciating it for the form that it was in, and also appreciating that your values was what was speaking the truth for you.
And the wisdom that you gained out of each one of those situations.
Yeah.
Creates actually the manifestation of your genius.
Yeah, and that in fact, to try and fit yourself in some kind of mould is futile, because all we can ever ask ourselves to do is live according to our own values. That's all anyone's ever going to do. And there's wisdom to when you can go back and look at seeing how all of those dots connected, and how, by not going down that beaten path, you put yourself in this kind of friendship group, which meant that you connected with that person. And, even in our case, like my deep sense of missing a community and my deep, perhaps one-sidedness about my parenting paradigm that I wanted to follow meant that I wasn't comfortable in the group that the council had put me in with my mother's group, with the other mothers, and part of my soul was seeking more. And so I joined a natural parenting group and met Jules, and had that not happened, had I not had that sense of lack or kind of changing course, then this podcast wouldn't be here. So as soon as you start to judge stuff as wrong, you've just got to ask yourself the question to get yourself back to, oh wow, the divinity of how it unfolded.
And in fact, the perfection of that soul purpose. Yeah. And yet all the roads you travel before you get, we all think we do this kind of snaky loop rather than going on this, direct linear line to our soul purpose. We do this kind of snaking to and fro and roundabouts, and we assume that we've made wrong choices, or we've gone down the wrong path in doing that snaking off of our, what we, consider to be our linear soul purpose. But in actual fact, each of those snakings is a new sense of wisdom that adds to our genius, that fuels our soul purpose, and therefore leaves the legacy, right?
Absolutely.
Totally serves. So what is your soul purpose? I mean, we're not doing soul purpose, legacy. What have you sort of worked out?
Well, it's kind of shifts and changes, but what I think the essence of it is connecting people to themselves. So it's, through this work, it's through the Suburban Sandcastles events work, which is really around.
So your legacy is to connect people to themselves. Yeah, okay.
And the form in which that takes, I know it will shift and change.
Yes.
But as I grow and as my wisdom grows, but the vehicles will be what leaves legacy, what creates the momentum, what creates the ripples. And it won't always look the way that I think it needs to look, but essentially it's about, because, I studied journalism, I studied media, I was really vocal at school around the injustices that I saw in the world, right? Because I wanted people to pull aside like the perceptions that they had around the way the world is, to see how it truly was. And I didn't have the wisdom then. I thought it was a particular form of doing that, and I now have more learning, so I see that that in a different way, but that's what's fueled me, has been that sense of needing to understand. And it's only through understanding that we can clear all of the noise and connect to what's true for us, and so the form will be Nourishing Your Mother, the form will be Suburban Sandcastles events and how they compel people to challenge their own belief systems and their stories and the status quo, to really look beyond what you might read or see or initially perceive about what's going on around you. So that's kind of what mine looks like to me at the moment. But yeah, I know it's going to change. And for me, it's then taking that back and going, okay, well, in 5 years' time, what is that? What will I have wanted to have created? How will I know that I'm on track to leave a legacy, I guess, is more like, you probably want to quantify it a bit more to say that you want to have touched however many people. Like John Demartini's legacy, I think, is to touch 1 billion people and help them transform their perceptions of themselves in the world, or something like that. It's really, really lofty. But until you have a vision beyond yourself, or until you have a vision that's bigger than you or your family, you'll never get beyond yourself. And same thing, until you have a purpose for your money that's bigger than yourself, you never create the income to get beyond yourself. So if you don't have a vision that's beyond your family to serve, then you'll just stay within serving your family. If you don't have a vision to create wealth, to make a difference in a community or a state or a city, then you'll only ever create enough wealth to meet your current needs for comfort. Because we need to stretch ourselves, and it's unless we have those goals, whether they're conscious or unconscious, we'll never grow past them. So having a concept of a legacy or a series of achievements that we want to meet, in the short, medium, long term, is what helps us to stretch ourselves, and what helps us to come back to a point of focus when and to mitigate the distractions that other people will place in our lives that take us away from essentially what's true for us. And you'll know it even in, you have seen this with women, working with women in birth. Like, if women listen to the opinions and voices around them, then they might go, oh, it doesn't matter too much if I don't prepare for this, or if I don't really cover that off, because no one else is. But it's their own inner voice and own inner goals and own vision that they need to stay true to fulfill it, not the whisperings of those around them. Because if you listen to everybody else around you all the time, you'll never get anywhere where you want to go, because there'll always be people who will be saying to you, you can't do that, that's not worthy, you're crazy, all that kind of stuff. So by having a sense of vision, whatever that looks like, whether that's short, medium, long term, ostentatious and lofty, or more simple in nature, having those things that propel us forward is what helps us to bring the life we want to fruition.
Yes. And to expect challenge along the way.
Yeah. And which, if they're congruent, if these values or goals that you set are congruent, you will more readily embrace those challenges, that they'll be seen as part of it. And it's like anyone who, a lot of women in our course really value health and wellness and fitness. So if you really value nutrition and healthy eating, then it won't faze you to spend 3 hours in the kitchen creating food for your family or for the week, because you derive immense pleasure from that. If you didn't have that as a value, it would seem like a chore or a task. If you highly value fitness, then you're going to jump out of bed and go for a run versus resenting it. So that's what we say when we mean that you more readily embrace those challenges, because they're kind of wrapped up in the fulfillment of that value.
Yes, they are. And each time you're trying to go a bit bigger, like you talk about the big lofty ideal, in comes upper limits too.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting. I had a friend talk to me about this recently. And she's just finished writing a book, and so she's up to the next part of that, and she is like bogged in, can't do it. Like she has to have the art space perfect, and the art space is not, and she can't get motivated to clean, like full on. And I was saying to her, but this is the obstacle that's the way, right? This is your upper limit. This is you and your previous self, of your preconceived notions of the level of success and, you know, ability and all of the rest of it that you think that you're capable of, and you're wanting to go to the other side of that. Well, all of those are coming, all of those boundaries are coming crashing in around you, going, let's just stay here where we know what the outcome is in this space. We don't have to be, you know, it's the ego, it's the comfort zone. And each time you're heading to that next evolution of you, which you're going to be doing when you're looking at working towards a soul purpose or a legacy, is to expect that this is almost you bursting through the last layers of your old self, bursting through those beliefs that are holding you back, bursting through those upper limits into the next evolution of you.
Yeah, and it's recognizing too that because so often I think when we can hit those roadblocks, we go, oh, that wasn't meant for me. Yeah. Which is such a cop-out. Like, we just use that as an excuse because we're not ready or willing or able to go past those upper limits.
Or that we assume if it was meant to be, it would be easy.
Yeah, or to be effortless, or there'd be ease.
Which I think is probably another massive misconception in the spiritual world, that if it's meant to be, it'll be easy. It'll just flow, or it'll just happen, or it'll just come to you.
Yeah. And I mean, like, and there is a level of alignment that does happen when the goals that you set are congruent with your values, and that you manifest people into your life to help you get to the next step. That's true, but there's still going to be massive challenges and massive roadblocks that you
have to grow. Yeah, to have the person that has a different current reality, like a different future, you have to grow into that person who, for that person, that reality is real.
And I mean, that's why there's a quote, like, you know, remember why you started, which is applicable to so many things, because when you get so close to that breakthrough moment,
know your why.
It's knowing your why. Yeah. You know, it's remembering why you cared about this in the first place, why you started this journey.
Why is it so important?
Same with birth, really. Remember, you know, why you're doing this.
Yeah.
Because it's like that kind of total crisis of confidence before the breakthrough to the next level of your awareness, or, you know, reaching of your goal, that you have that whole sense where fear wants to keep you back.
Yeah, that's right.
The comfort zone is kind of calling your name because it feels safe and it feels cozy.
Yes. And yet breaking through that can be scary.
Yeah.
I always think about the legacy, and tell me if this is wrong, but I mean, I'm certainly still on the path of trying to really hone in on what mine is. But I always think of it like, if I were to die next week, let's just make it morbid, and someone's standing up telling my eulogy, and there were people in the room of that chapel or whatever where that ceremony was taking place, what's the feeling they would get when they're celebrating my life? What's the thing that everyone would walk out of there touched in a different way about just because I lived?
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Is that kind of, you know?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, totally. Yeah.
Because I find it easier to think about that way when we're not talking about, I think when you get the small realizations, you can get to the lofty one.
But I mean, I think also that speaks beautifully to your values, right? Like, so even phrasing it in that way.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
You have an enormous value on community and connection and relationships. And so the way that you've actually phrased that totally speaks to that, because it's about how you make people feel versus some abstract leaving of something.
Yeah,
you know?
Yes.
So I think that you've already tuned into it largely. You know, it's about, you know, what does that look like if I'm to quantify that? What does that look like? And if I'm wanting to create vast change.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Quite confronting, really, to be thinking in those terms, like, you know, if I was to die next week or this or that, the other. But I always think of the Steve Jobs when he said, like, the fact that I'm going to die makes me all the more determined to make my living worthwhile, or something like that, you know, but as humans, we're so good at ignoring that fact, or thinking we have forever, and thinking that things that we see that happen to people around us won't happen to us, because it's immensely uncomfortable and painful. But actually, if we can sit in that and tap into our inner self and what our inner self is therefore asking us to step into and awaken, there's an immense amount of inspiration there. because none of us, I mean, comparatively speaking, have that long here, you know, in the concept of universal time. It's like a blink, you know, our lifetime here in this broader universe. And so who are we not to make that time that we spend here meaningful and worth something, and beyond simply just having to work to pay bills, to make a certain living, to enjoy holidays from our lives we don't like. Like, how do you transform that around to being every day I wake up with some form of inspiration for the life that I'm living versus wanting to escape from the life that I'm living?
Is that what a meaningful life means to you, to wake up?
Yeah.
In essence, falling in love with the life that you have.
Yeah, and constantly looking for the beauty and the inspiration and the gratitude in every day, as because I've lived the life of Groundhog Day. You know, I've lived the life of resenting a job that I didn't enjoy and willing it to be the weekend. You know, and I think that's awesome, because I now know that I don't want to go back to that. You know, and so now when I feel myself going into those spaces, you know, asking myself the questions: who am I comparing my life to? Who do I think I should be that I'm not? Which is, you know, comparison's ridiculous, but we do it. And what do I need more of to light myself up again? You know, as opposed to simply just accepting the status quo of the life that we've become accustomed to or comfortable with. That's
a really powerful question. What do I need more of to light me up?
Yeah,
that's a really powerful question.
And I think it's a basic one, but it's something we should all be asking ourselves. Yeah, I don't think it's enough to accept.
What do I need to live a life of inspiration? What do I need to feel inspired?
Yeah,
right now?
And I mean, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be without pain. And sometimes we go through years. Some of us, you know, have experiences that are enormously painful and that can feel like they're all consuming. But I guess it's, how do you move beyond that to take the wisdom from that and turn that pain and into wisdom, and in turn the wisdom into inspiration to act as a catalyst to get ourselves on track and inspired and connected and deeply moved to be grateful to wake up every day. You know, I think that there's so many quotes that you can see popping up on Instagram that fill you up for just a second, you know, and you think, yes, you know, like, yes, I am grateful to breathe that sea air. Yes, I am grateful to have these legs that I can fling out of bed and step on a beautiful plush carpet. But how do we make more of those moments? And I think we make more of those moments by listening to what our life is demonstrating is important to us, to our own values, and building a vision that means we can leave a legacy or make a difference with those things.
And live in more daily alignment with
those. Even if it's, you know, even if it's one thing a day, even if it's taking 15 minutes just to jot down what you might want to do in 6 months, or 3 phone calls this week you might want to make that gets you closer to that, just so that you're taking baby steps towards a vision that's bigger than the daily grind, you know, or the short-term kind of pains of life. It's that stretch for something bigger and more that compels us to keep unveiling more parts of ourselves to awaken and serve the world with, I think.
I just want to listen to you talk. I'm just loving it. Talk about feeling inspired. It just helps having discussion, having this podcast in your ear that speaks of these conversations you don't have another place for in your life. The conversation that lights you up, that makes you reconnect with that truth, that says, oh, what are you doing with this one magnificent life?
And we all have that voice, right? Like, every single person has that voice within that yearns for more, you know, that wants to have those conversations with people that stir your soul and that, you know, inspire you to step up. I mean, this is that concept, you know, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It's like, how do I stretch myself by stretching those around me sometimes, because it can be a mutual journey of recognizing that, no, we don't want to get caught up in this. How can we find this next level? How can we, you know, ask more of ourselves to not go into you know, the petty conversations and the, you know, like the stuff that leaves us depleted rather than filled up. How do we create more of that? Because then you'll start to see more opportunities. You'll start to ask yourself better questions that take you beyond the self-limiting beliefs that say that, oh, I can't do that, you know.
And you start to see, do you know the other thing I found really interesting is you start to see genius everywhere.
Yeah. I love all your accounts of that, you know.
Oh, it's like been the biggest epiphany for me, and I would say probably only in the last 6 months or something. But it's like I got to a certain point where I went, oh my God, I totally get my path and my genius, and you know, and that's still evolving for me. But just the simple recognition and the bowing to myself and my soul that previously I would have judged and cringed at has been transformational in awakening my service to this world, right? And in doing that, my soul purpose, alignment, and legacy, which is all incredibly inspiring to live a life of alignment. But in doing that, I'm constantly like awed at the genius that is just sparking around me all of the time that I was previously completely oblivious to, because I had this one very narrow definition of what a genius was. And a genius was Mozart or the 5-year-old that could, you know, I don't know, dance ballet or sing like Whitney, who knows. But genius is like so much bigger than that, and I'm completely awakened by genius everywhere. And, you know, I'll be sitting around, like, even I was talking to one of the mums at the table the other day at school. One of these mums goes, oh, you're constantly talking to me about her son who's in class with my daughter, and is constantly saying all the time she hears how much he loves Jade, my daughter's lunchboxes. He can't believe every day how, like, he wants her out of anybody's, he wants her, like, it's just amazing, these lunchboxes. And I was laughing about it, and I'm going, that's hilarious, because one, that's me not owning that genius yet. But two, how interesting that he notices food so much, and I bet you food is part of his genius.
Yeah, like he's obviously really valuing
because he values it enough to notice it out of the, you know, the cacophony of noise happening in that world and room for that child. He's zoned in on food.
Yes.
That's no mistake, right?
So what else in his life is lining up to value
And I said that to her, and she went, oh, he loves food. He cooks all the time. I was like, that's his genius. Like, somewhere there is something extraordinary for him. And how amazing would it be when we recognise these specific points of interest / genius in our children, and we fuel them, we kind of fan those
and that's
flames.
what I love that. I love that about, you know, doing that for your children, because the more you can do that for your children, and this is this idea, like the more you help other people to fulfill their values, you fulfill your own. Because by recognising the genius in others and nurturing that, you're more able to recognise and nurture it in yourself. You know, by following the little breadcrumbs of your child's inspirations and kind of preempting that next level of knowledge that they might be seeking by providing those resources for them, or those connections, or those activities for them. There's such a richness in that for you, because you then start to ask yourself, okay, well, what do I need? Like, what do I want to awaken in myself that I'm so readily doing that for my children in?
And genius is like everywhere. Genius is everywhere, and in so many forms that it just blows my mind.
And I think that the problem is we so often disown it, because we compare, we think it should be something that it's something else.
Yes, or we're so narrow in what. We're so narrow in what we think genius is, and I'm so fascinated by this label of right or wrong that we put in things, and in which case I think we cap what genius is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think any kind of black or white thinking is limiting, because nothing is black or white.
No, and in fact, the fact that we're having an emotional reaction to something is the whole point.
Yeah.
It doesn't take away from what the genius is that's actually happening or sparking. It's not the thing, right? It's the creation of that journey in that person.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, I'll tell you the story that I know. I told Bridget the other night. I found my daughter this week she's only 8, and they have to read every night as part of their homework, which she largely does. But then she has to get a parent to sign it off each night, and if you don't, then you get held in for 5 minutes at playtime the next day. And I'm notoriously bad at signing. It's just been like this ongoing thing. And which is fine, because the school know that, and they kind of make it more of the child's resilience, and that it needs to be their responsibility, not the parents. I completely respect that, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I was looking at my child's diary the other day, having communications with the teacher, and I realised she's got weeks of it being signed. And I looked back and went, oh my God, she's forged our signature. I'm laughing. I know, because it sounds hideous, right? I sound like a callous one. I can hear myself previously judging, what sort of child would lie and deceive in the way that they couldn't own up to it to any of the authority figures in life, and they're forging it. But the thing is, when we remove the label of bad, I mean, we had these enormous conversation with her that went on for like 45 minutes with her dad and I, and it was deeply rich and emotional, and, really needed her to own the choice that she'd made and the effect that had on everybody around her, and how she was going to restore those relationships, blah, blah, blah. We had all of those conversations. But then she left the room, and I turned around to my husband and I cracked up and went, she's a fucking genius. Like, seriously, if we remove this label of that bad,
being bad or wrong,
this is like genius.
Because how resourceful was she to figure out, hey, how can I avoid? Clearly, my mum and dad are shit at this.
Yes.
So how can I get, still get out and enjoy my full recess?
Yes. How can I still get what I want?
Yeah.
Without, avoiding the consequences. Yeah. And everybody thinks, like, it's so creative.
Essentially, she was creating like a win-win. Her teachers' needs were met because there was signature in there.
Yep.
You and your dad didn't have to be burdened by this responsibility to always remember to sign it.
Yes.
And she could still get a free lunch. It's actually perfect.
It's like genius. And I just went, the creative, manipulative brain processes that think outside the box on how to work this situation to her best benefit is genius. Like, forget that this thing is good or bad.
Yeah.
The actual process that's happening within her mind to create that is genius. And she's 8.
And I mean, this is the richness of parenting, right? Because kids are much less conditioned to social norms of right and wrong and good and bad, so that they can be much quicker at thinking about creative ways to, kind of resolve things or get solutions. And there's so much learning for us in that. Like, my husband and I, even with my 3-year-old, he's classic at negotiating. Remember, he's learning his numbers and he's always kind of trying to negotiate stuff. And sometimes he comes up with these stellar propositions where, like, both of us are just kind of like dumbfounded because, like, wow, we really want to tell you off for that, but actually we can't because that was just too clever. Like, and you think, wow, like, we've got to have that balance as parents for kind of governing the rules, so to speak. But if we can have a level of fluidity too, to recognise the richness and the genius in allowing them to create their own deals and win-wins and flexibility, like, how much can we learn from them?
Oh my God. And how much does that create an incredibly interesting adult?
Yeah.
Like the to stand very truthfully in your power, if you think about when you left high school, to stand in the knowledge that you had the capacity to create win-wins, to affect change and manipulate a situation in which everybody comes out feeling good.
Yeah.
To creatively be able to do that. Can you imagine the life like that sets up?
But that's also one of those classic examples of as that person being able to be an expert in relationships, which is what that would require. So often you wouldn't think twice about that. You'd just assume other people could do that too.
Well, you wouldn't label it as genius.
Yeah, you wouldn't. You would just think, oh, that's just who I am or what I do. But there's an absolute
genius
and an opportunity to create a service from.
Yes.
That might not be conventional, but is actually so deeply tied into who you are.
I just love this stuff. I think this is what we're talking about when we talk about genius, is it's not the cataclysmic version of genius where you can play Mozart and you can, sing and dance in an extraordinary way.
And I mean, yes, those cases are deeply inspiring.
Oh, they're deeply genius. But it's the fact that genius is so much bigger than that. That, in fact, those people that you think are amazing or incredible for different reasons, each are serving a genius.
Yeah.
And that just imagine waking that up within your life and kind of drip feeding it or fanning those flames for your children. Like, what a difference would that create in this world?
Absolutely. I mean, and it really teaches us to be resourceful, because I think of a Tony Robbins quote where he says there's never a lack of resources as such. It's a lack of resourcefulness, like it's never that you couldn't do something. It's just that you weren't resourceful enough to figure out how you could do it, because it's not always you that has to to do the grunt work in a business or do the grunt work in any kind of situation, if you ask the right questions, you become resourceful enough to figure out how you can still get it done.
Exactly.
You know, because it's all about asking those right questions, continuing to challenge yourself and see a different perspective.
And this is creativity too.
Yeah.
I really get offended when people say, "Oh, I'm not creative."
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Creativity is not being able to
paint or draw or,
exactly. Creativity is the very definition of creativity is the ability to think creatively outside the box, to not accept the status quo, to figure out the end goal and find a way to get there. And particularly in that process, creating a win-win is like the genius aspect of that. But creativity in its essence is just the ability to think outside the box.
Yeah, don't get stuck in the form of it.
No.
Because the form is different depending on, you know, your own talents and skills and interests. But everyone has an inherent level of inherent creativity. It's just how they're expressing it.
Yes.
And how do you awaken more of your own?
And how do you awaken more of it? Exactly. Oh, I'm feeling so inspired, Bridget.
Yeah, I like these episodes.
Yes.
So if you've liked this episode too, we would love you to jump on iTunes and rate us, because that keeps us going and tells other people around the world all about who we are and what we do and the tribe that we're creating. If you want to get contact us, we're at nourishingthemother.com.au and also on Facebook. If you want to get in touch with Jules,
thepleasurenutritionist.com.
And for me, it's suburbansandcastles.com.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.